And then we have a consultation. It's like 6, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, maybe later, something. It's hard to remember all this. A lot of COVID, I black out. And the GI doc just kind of comes up to me and she says, this isn't going in the right direction. What I want to do is put you on a supplemental immunosuppressant. So there'll be like another immunosuppressant that supplements that. And she just told us, she says this so flippantly, like, it's just like, yeah, no big deal, whatever. And I go look this thing up, and it's known to cause lupus, blood cancers.
Ernesto, how did you find Carnivore?
First, Dave, I just want to thank you for having me on the show. And I also want to thank your audience. Hey, everybody. It's like pretty cool to get the opportunity to share my story with everyone here. That's like pretty sympathetic, I would argue, towards the idea of carnivore. But also, I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are just sort of exploring this concept. And so with my story, for me, it began around 2020. Right when COVID was starting to, pop off. And so while everybody was stressing out about COVID, I got a wonderful diagnosis called ulcerative colitis. And I can't, it's like I'm trying to figure out how much TMI should I go into it, but I think I wouldn't wish that disease on anybody. Like, just, it's an awful disease. And I guess for people that don't know, it's basically your immune system starts to attack your GI tract. It confuses the cells of your own tissues, and it's just like a runaway inflammatory response. And it changes your life. It just completely, almost immediately changes the whole experience. And so I was compelled to try to find a solution to what ulcerative colitis was. And if I want to summarize it, just so you guys know how awful it is, imagine suddenly having to go to the bathroom, like when you get the sun on earth, but it comes on like super strong, immediate, with pain. And then you go to the bathroom, right? And you then suffer for the next 15, 20 minutes trying to get the stuff out. And a lot comes out, blood, liquid, a bunch of other things. And then you don't feel done. You don't feel like it's finished, and that about an hour and a half, maybe 2, if you're lucky, you're going to have to do that over again. So if you can imagine, it commits you to have immediate access to a bathroom within immediate running distance. Right. So that, like, to say the least, changes your life. Right. And so the hospitals at the time were shutting down, and I'm like, no, I'm going to have to figure out a way out of this. And, you start to work on your dissertation of ulcerative colitis. Like, you just all you care about is to figure out what this disease is and how I got here. Right. And your immediate gut reaction, you're immediate driven to, like, okay, it must be because I've been eating terrible my whole life. Terrible, quote unquote. It must have been all the hot Cheetos that I used to love, and all the sodas and fried chicken or whatever it was. And now, for real, I'm going to get serious. I'm going to just eat vegetables. I'm going to go down the vegetarian hardcore. My father's a vegetarian. Like, he was always warning me about this stuff. What's going to happen? Didn't listen to him anyway. So, and you go down this path to discover, and into the preceding months of dealing with this disease, it's like you try everything. Like I was doing kale shakes every day. I was, Michael Gerber's website, Nutrition Facts. I was like ODing on all of that, and of course, nothing's satisfactory from that material. But at the time, I thought, look, this is it. He's got tons of researchers. It's a nonprofit. He cites all his sources. But like in the ulcerative colitis area, it's kind of like, here's what you do to try to prevent getting it. But once you have it, it's like that. There's no answers. And now, of course, I was like liquefying red cabbages because I had found something about a compound. I was consuming curcumin. Curcumin is a powerful anti-inflammatory. That does help, but you're just basically downing plant matter, thinking that this is what you have to do, right? And it made everything absolutely worse. It got worse and worse and worse. It got to the point where I had to be hospitalized. I was getting sepsis. And I had gone to my GI doc. I got a GI doc. They give me some initial medications, but at the end, and I didn't want, they were like, you have to get an immunosuppressant, which is basically just turn down the immune response to your whole body with this hammer of a tool. Right. And I didn't want it. And of course, the hospitals they had COVID. I didn't want to go to, nobody is that awful period. We're all locked down and we don't want to go anywhere unless it's a true emergency. So I just went to the nth degree. And then I'm like, okay, I'm getting fevers. And in the process of that, I had lost like 40 pounds. I mean, I just like shed weight because it's just your body can't absorb anything, any nutrition, right? Because your whole gut is all totally destroyed. And so, yeah, I ended up in the hospital for about a week. They gave me direct mainline infusions, and that's saved me, from the cliff. And I'll never forget that nurse, because it's like I think they're so profuse. I can't, you can't even imagine. It's like this lady's there. It's the hospital's COVID infected. They're all wearing masks, and then she's got to deal with me and like the stuff that's coming out my behind. I just like that lady was an angel. Anyway. So so they stabilized me, and it was the first time in like probably 3 or 4 months or so that I was able to actually eat a meal with, the hospital food. I remember it was like a steak or something they gave me, some flat iron little thing. It was the most delicious food. I had thought like I may never be able to eat regular food again or whatever. So I get out of that and begin the infusions. But I'm also, I think I jumped ahead. I began the infusions at that point, but during just prior to the hospitalization, I had even reached out to a researcher at UMass who specialized in ulcerative colitis, and I asked, "Hey, do you have any nutritionists?" And I got one. This is an important point, right? I had gotten a nutritionist. She herself had ulcerative colitis. She herself was managing it without medication, but and it was the beginning of like this exploration of like, no, don't eat all that stuff you're trying. We need to create a more bland diet, a softer diet, like low fiber. Just start at the. I was eating basically white bread and it was like sourdough bread and like some oats or something, right? And then slowly you introduce other foods to see how you react into that space. But like I said, that didn't work. Michael Gerber didn't work. My nutritionist from UMass, that didn't work, and I ended up in the hospital, right? But once I got out, it felt like I got my life back. And for the first few days, I was like just eating like I had been starving because I had been. And then it began the injecting infusions in me. And the thing about dealing with an immunosuppressant is that you have to there's a certain amount that you have to figure out you need in the bloodstream at a constant pace. And then they're measuring also the antibodies. And the tricky part is that sometimes the body reacts against the chemical that you're injecting. And then the antibodies start to build, or some of the chemical is still there at the end of your cycle of 6 weeks. And so they're monitoring this, trying to figure out what's the right amount to keep this inflammation at bay. And I remember talking to my GI doc, and I had asked her, I mean, I'm getting the compound now that you told me to get, but is there anything, I can do like diet wise? Her response, her face was like, That's it. No, we don't know. We don't know. Like they don't know what causes ulcerative colitis, and they don't know what diet. That's it. Just take this chemical, go home. And I would have been fine with that. I would have been okay kind of going with it. But the problem is that I'd stabilized, but I was starting to trend against it. Like my body was starting to respond against the thing. And all I'm thinking is, how do I stop this chemical compound? Like I don't want to be on immunosuppressant first. I don't want to get whatever other things. If you're turning down your immune system for the ulcerative colitis, you're turning it down for everything else: cancers, funguses, infections, everything, right? Um, and so it's not trending the right way. And I had gotten used to just sort of back to eating what I wanted, but it's not trending right. And then we have a consultation. It's like 6, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, maybe later, something. It's hard to remember all this. A lot of COVID, I black out. And the GI doc just kind of comes up to me and she says, this isn't going in the right direction. What I want to do is put you on a supplemental immunosuppressant. So there'll be like another immunosuppressant that supplements that. And she just told us, she says this so flippantly, like, it's just like, yeah, no big deal, whatever. And I go look this thing up, and it's known to cause lupus, blood cancers. I mean, this is like heavy duty, can kill you material. And, she's saying, and then when I brought that up to her, like, this thing can cause lupus, she says, no, we're just going to do it for a year or two. So you'll be fine. That's just so matter of factly. I was like, and it just brought back the panic that I had earlier when I got the ulcerative colitis. I'm like, no, this cannot. I have to. I can't stop my obsession to figure out a way out of this. It's like you're trapped in a box, and it's just getting worse, even though you've slowed down the precipitous worst part. Right. But you can see this isn't going to, I'm not going to last 2, 3, 4 years like this. I mean, surgery is the next stage. If you stop these chemicals, sometimes the body then overreacts to the stoppage and then you can't get back on, or that's what they tell you, these GI docs, there's like maybe 5 or 6 different immunosuppressants that you can cycle into until you find the one that sort of works for you. But the one that was working for me was not consistently. It was getting worse and worse. So back into research mode, Dave. And I, so I'm like looking, and I just like happened to come across a presentation that was given by Richard Smith at Keto Pro, and his presentation was like shockingly eye-opening for me. It was like him talking about his personal life, that he had been, overweight and had pre-diabetic or diabetes, and he had been a weightlifter his whole life, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And then he decided to change his diet into this sort of, carnivore-based thing, and then all of this stuff went away. And I know for a fact that I tried all the other modalities, all the vegetarian, hardcore vegetarian, vegan, whatever. I had tried all that, but the one thing I hadn't tried was, what if I just get rid of all of it, all of the carbs, all of the plant matters, and just dive into eating just meat, just the animal meat. It took me a long time. It took me at least 2 years, because it sounded so ridiculous too. That, what do you mean, just all meat? And from watching others' videos, then I came across Dr. Anthony Chafee, who he's even, I mean, they're both, both of those guys are fantastic. They're like my go-to sources for this information. And I mean, I went nuts into the research, because I had big concerns about colorectal cancers, right? Because that ulcerative colitis. I had concerns about cholesterol. So I wasn't just going to take some guy off the internet, even if he was a doctor, telling me about that cholesterol's been maligned and it's actually what you need. I was like, really? Let me look. And it's like, look up the studies that they reference, look up read through that stuff, try to dig. I mean, it took me 3 years, because it was, I started kind of like incorporating more of that in my life, but I wasn't quite ready to get rid of all the vegetables, but I was reducing the carb. I was more and more like a keto approach, and I was starting to feel a little better. But I remember to this day, it was January of this year when I said, okay, let's just go hardcore, only meat, get rid of everything else. And I have never felt better. I have never felt better. I've never like that changed everything.
Wow. So, well, congratulations on getting to this point, but, had you been on the immunosuppressants up until January, and were you able to stop?
Well, I still am right now because it's like I said, they scare you into the idea. Like once you find the immunosuppressant that's working, don't mess with it because if you stop, there's definitely anecdotal stories and cases where people travel to another country to live for another country. They can't get it's very expensive. They can't get that immunosuppressant in that other country. Then their health deteriorates. And when they come back and they re-up, the body immediately rejects it. Like it notices it's a foreign body and it doesn't want it. However, I started this year I started about 4 sessions ago to start to titrate away. So in other words, the way you do it is, I was up to every 4 weeks. I had to go get this infusion, and it takes 2 hours, and so it's time, And we decided talking to my GI doc after showing her my blood work and all kinds of things. Let's try this 6 weeks. I'm feeling really, really good. Let's go to 6 weeks. And so we did that. And now this month, I'm going to go to 7 weeks. And so basically we're going further and further where you have less and less of the chemical compound, and see how my body, is it still stable, or am I going back to those? There's like indications of like when you start to have a flare in it. And I know it. I know I'm stable because the only time I start to have some pre-indications of trouble is when I pig out on some bag of potato chips or some cookies or something carbs or something in that processed foods that I know in 2 days it's gonna be different and I'm gonna and it and it's the kind of thing that 40 years of my life, I'm 50, 40 years of my life, I've just ignored. Like, it's just the way, just wipe a couple more times, you're fine. I never really realized until I got this disease. The disease makes you really intimately aware of what's in the toilet bowl, and what that means when it's malformed, bowel movement. I'm trying not to go. I'm trying to keep it G-rated for you guys. Do my best if I can, but like that is a thing, and I realize now that probably so many people have these bowel movements that are not healthy, and they don't even realize it. They're just, their body hasn't deteriorated to the point of into a disease state like ulcerative
Just
colitis, but
it's always been this way.
yeah, you've lived with it, right? Um, I
Mm.
January was incredible. So I've always did some exercise. I used to love doing running, and I got a really sporty kid. So love to. I've never been really a super sporty person, but because I got this kid and I got to throw the football and basketball, and so I started just about 3 years ago, before all this sort of became an issue. I had picked up some basketball, and I was working some basketball. And after I got the hospitalization, after I stabilized, I kind of came back to it, and slowly but surely was doing my workouts. And my workouts really consisted about maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, 3 times a week. Kind of get to a basketball court, do some shots, do some dribbling, get really, get sweaty, do a sprint or two. And I'm like, all right, I feel like I did it, and do a little bit of ad hoc weightlifting here and there, and you'll feel the 2 days later is usually when I feel kind of stiff, like, oh, I did a good workout, and I, it was like week 2 of the month of January, when I realized I was playing my basketball, and I looked at my watch, and I was like, oh shit, I'm going to be late for this kid's school. It was like 2 hours later. What? What? It was like overnight. And that was amazing, but also problematic for a different reason. But other than missing being late for school, but I couldn't believe it, and I just started working out with longer. I had the energy. I didn't feel like I was exhausted. Prior to the month, I'd be exhausted by half an hour. I'm like, I don't have anything else in it. And then I went to 2 hours, like not even feeling whatever. To fast forward to today, my workouts I do 5 times a week. I get in at 5 in the morning and I'm done at 7:30. And I go wild with my basketball. I'm doing all kinds of movements, dribbles. I'm doing sprints. I'm running backwards. I'm doing like push-ups, a wall sit. It's all kinds of stuff. And and the thing that stops me is the fact that at 7:30 I got to get home to take my kid to school. I could. It feels like I could continue to. I have the a huge extra gear. I think Dr. Anthony Chafee had mentioned it. Like he doesn't feel aches and pains, and he feels like it was odd for him. And yeah, it's the same way. I don't have the 2-day soreness later. No matter how hard I work out, it just doesn't. I feel loose. I feel stable. It was wild.
It's
Yeah.
amazing having that feeling suddenly that you can just keep going, right?
It was too amazing. It was too amazing because then I had to go tell my brother. I got to go tell my best friends. I got to tell some of the neighborhood dads. I just suddenly I'm a converted, carnivore for life, religious zealot. That's how they described it to me. I just it's like I've accidentally by happenstance, compelled by a horrible disease, landed on this amazing approach to eating. A little boring, maybe. I don't know, whatever you want to criticize it, but you're going to feel better. That's all I wanted to tell them. So please, one of you guys has to try this.
No interest?
No, none, zero. It caused incredible fights, incredible arguments. I mean, they had the same concerns that I did: the cholesterol. What about the vitamins in the vegetables? What about, But I had all those concerns. And that's why it took me 2 years really of digging research before I even attempted it. It was 21, 22. Yeah. It's 24. Yeah. 2 years, 2.5 years of hardcore research before I thought, is this for real? Really just eat fat, just eat the fat, eat the fatty parts. Don't cut that off. Yeah. It's been that part of it has been quite disappointing. It's been disappointing in lots of ways. And perhaps I'm not the best, I do a podcast, but I'm not the best communicator of health rationalizations, perhaps. But it's
Right.
it's like I described it to someone recently. It feels like I'm in I'm in a funhouse mirrors. I walk in the world of funhouse mirrors. Everyone is sick. Everyone's not feeling their optimal way. I'm feeling great. What? But everyone looks at my diet as bizarre and dangerous. And I'm going to get cancer and I'm going to get high cholesterol and I'm going to die of a heart attack. I'm going to pay the piper here at some point. What?
Yeah. The thing is, though, your body is telling you the exact opposite, right?
Yes. That's the incredible it's so confusing to be trying to explain. And I'm no expert in this world. I have done a lot of research, certainly, but I can't perhaps articulate it as best. And even if I give them which I have shown specific, clipped out parts where Anthony Chafee's talking about it, or Richard's talking about this one aspect, and I'm just giving it to them. It's to them, it sounds like those are just weird people on the internet, and that I've been brainwashed. They think I've been brainwashed.
You're in a cult now, and there's no getting you out.
Yeah, but they see it though. They do see the changes. I mean, I'm just feel more I've shed weight. I feel more muscular. I have more just general energy. Like I do a year, every year we get together with my best friends from high school. And I remember, you know, being 40 and getting winded, just grabbing some logs to build the fireplace. And, yesterday I went out to the shed. I had to kind of walk it over to this big fireplace. I didn't crack a sweat. There was no hard, it was enjoyable. I was like, I made a gigantic fire pit thing. Anyway. And it's like, I've had many moments like those. Where I'm like, oh, I remember not being able to do this as well. And,
It's kinda like your body enjoys working now, right?
yes, yes. It wants to move. It wants to move. It wants to lift something heavy or just walk around or just, yeah, it's weird. And my brother did notice it. We got some bikes. We did a little bit of a bike tour. And my brother's an avid runner. He runs a lot, and he's always been in shape. He's always been really good shape. Um, and we got, when your brother's on a bike and you're on a bike and you got long bike paths, you're gonna see who can who can go. And he made the remark. I didn't even say anything, but I took him. We went as fast as we can for as long as we can. Really try to get the breath really intensely, feel it. And so it took him back a bit. And he was like, well, I don't know. Maybe it is all that meat he's eating. I'm like, yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. Please try it.
Yeah,
Please,
nice.
somebody.
So, how
Um,
have you been eating to get to this point?
like my daily
Yeah.
like how do I do it?
Mm.
So I like going to Costco here in the US, and get a whole ribeye. It's like the whole thing. Comes out to like $11 a slice once you slice it, and I bring it in and I just slice all the ribeyes, just a bunch of them. And I bought to avoid freezer burn, I bought one of those machines that you can, take the air out, and it's a process, but it's less, $11. If we go to a fancy Wegmans here in the East Coast, they're going to charge you like $28, $30 for one ribeye. I've been exploring the idea, although I found a farm nearby, where I can buy like a quarter cow, and then they do all the freeze drying, packing, they do it all, and it comes down to even further, like $8, $9 or something like that. Um, but Costco's been the best cost savings. I actually don't like going to the grocery store to buy the meat. I just rather get that whole thing. It lasts me a week or two, depending if the kids want a bunch or not, or depending if I have guests over, because that's what I'm serving. I'm serving ribeyes. If you're coming to my house and you're gonna have fun, that's what we're doing. It does hurt looking at some of my friends chop off the fatty parts, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it off for them, and I'm going to keep that, because obviously it's just going to go in the trash otherwise. And then
Yeah.
I also do. We have like Costco has a really good kind of a rib cut beef thing. We call them ribbies in my house, and my kids love the ribbies. It's pretty fatty, and they come in slices. They're easy to throw them into the. One of the best little things is a air fryer. We have an air fryer. Throw it in that thing, cooks it up 5-6 minutes, and there's lunch. You know, um, and so that's generally what I do. My wife thinks it's utterly boring, and she still isn't entirely convinced that we don't need vegetables. So there's a struggle there in communication and just trying to figure our way through it. She loves baking. She's from Minnesota. They're known for baking good stuff, but I can't have it. And I understand that the kids might want some, but we've gotten pretty good at reducing all factory food, all extra sugary stuff as much as I can. And it is a sense of tension sometimes between my wife and I, because I want them to be even further. Like I know how this, I know how it feels, and I really wish my wife would be just give it a try for a month, like a real try. But I don't know, it's baby steps. So we try to mix in fish and pork and other things, and just I'm gonna try to explore. It's just so easy with the ribeye. It's like it's so tasty. It's so easy. Put some salt, pepper, some seasoning. Meal's done. I can go with the rest of my life. I can get to do whatever I want. But for other people, that's not it's not a variety enough. So
Yeah, and that variety is important when you're not basically when you're not committed to this way of eating because you don't have the same kind of satiation if you're not properly committed to it, right?
yeah, I think you're spot on there, Dave, with that. The satiation isn't sufficient, and so you're eating more at a time. You're having your lunch, you're having a snack, you're having your dinner. It's like you're just and so if you're doing the same thing every lunch, dinner, snack, that seems crazy to you, right? You want a variety. So I want my salad, I want my mixed vegetables and for dinner, and I want like some kind of yogurt or thing. And I get it. That's how I was eating. But it's not it's just like it's like I said, it's not optimal. And I think one of the things that really landed, one of the ones that had really shook me into awareness was I think it was Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where had said that, you know, all animals in the world have a specific dietary consumption. Like like animals evolved to eat a one type of material, whether it's like if they're eating grasses like the cows, or they're eating other animals because they're predators. And so why should that be different for humans? And I never conceptualized that. And he said the only animals that eat mixed stuff really are dogs and humans. And you're like, oh, right. And that's why dogs are getting sick too. Right.
Yeah, that's why
Right.
dogs get diabetes now.
Right. And one of my neighbor's dogs has like a diseased disc in his back because they've been giving him just kibbles, plant stuff. They're fairly plant based, and so when the poor dog comes to our house, and I had asked before, but I just give him some steak. I just give the dog some steak, and that dog loves me because I'm giving him what he really wants to eat, right? And they were here for the week. We had the dog for the week while they were traveling, and the dog's better. We're returning the dog in a better state than they came. Like a pet dog rehab over here, because we're feeding him that stuff, right? Um, it's funny. It brings me a memory of I'm half Mexican. I have family in Mexico, and they just feed the dog table scraps, chicken, steak, whatever. And I feel like those dogs are always quite healthy. Like why do we need this like weird factory fried kibble stuff? I don't know, but ultimately that hit me too. That's like, yeah, why should the human? I mean, the fact that we're adaptable, that's probably helped the species survive, but it doesn't mean that it's optimal, right? You can eat just potatoes and water, but that doesn't mean that you're going to last forever that way, right? So,
And, oh man, that sounds like a lovely diet, potatoes and water.
right, right,
Um, so
yeah,
I've often thought about this kind of thing as well. Like, why would we be the only species that needs balance and the only species that needs to buy things in a box or buy supplements and all this kind of thing? And the only conclusion I could get to is we're the only species that has a wallet.
sure,
And
100%, 100%, hundred
you know,
percent. I had one of the I live in Washington, D.C., and I do a lot of work with nonprofits. And I happen to fall into, this might get me in trouble, but I happen to fall into, years ago, I was working for the IFIC, the Information Food Information Council. And it's basically a nonprofit that helps talk to regulators about dietary guidelines. I remember it was 2014, and they were approaching the 2015 changes to the dietary guidelines. And I got invited. I was doing I do like web technology stuff, but I got invited to see what it's like to be them, and they hosted a couple of the folks that were on that dietary guidelines task force. And it was sort of like they were going to talk about what looks like, what the research is starting to look like, what it's going to end up shaping, what the numbers, sort of trying to indicate what it's going to happen by 2015. Nothing's quite settled, but just sort of a panel discussion about what's being debated. And I remember absolutely distinctly that meeting because they got into a tangent of like the year before they had said Americans need 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. But the data was showing that Americans were on average eating 3 servings on a daily basis. And so the discussion went into this thing about should we or should we not say for 2015 increase the number of servings to 7 so that you can get Americans average up to 5. And I remember going, what? Wait, what the? Like, honestly, sorry, I don't mean to curse, but I was like, they were not talking about what is optimal. They're not trying a line in the sand. They were trying to lead us toward, like, they don't know. They don't have the answer because the answer is not that. The answer is not fruits and vegetables. That's the answer. The answer is you don't eat as much fruits and vegetables. It didn't connect that way for me. It just simply, I walked out going, I can't believe these people are talking about saying 7 so they get everybody to 5. They should say the body needs 5 servings, right? Like that's it. And then let people figure out how they get there. But you don't, And of course, if you looked at the invitation list, you would see that it had like companies like Monsanto, they had like Merck, they had I think not 3M. They had I can't even remember. It was like several companies of like big ag, but also chemical companies, because they're all projecting like if they can change their dietary guidelines in a certain way, then that means they can report back to their companies going, hey, we're going to be able to sell this much more tonnage of fertilizers because we're going to have to get this much more output from the agriculture sector, right? So they're heavily in there. They're invited. They want to know. They want to make sure everybody eats their fruits and vegetables, right? It's money.
It's really bad.
Wild.
Yeah, it all comes down to money, right? When you first started that story, and it's like Americans are only eating 3 serves a day. We need to get them to 5. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, that'll
Right.
completely solve everything.
Sure, that way all the problem. Yeah, it's not. It's just wrong. It's just the, once you get into the biochemistry aspects of it, is when you start to realize, when you anatomy, physiology, comparative anatomy, physiology. Look at your gut, the way it's done. Compare that to a gorilla. Compare that to a cow, and you'll notice significant difference in structure because they're digesting. They're primarily digesting something totally different than what we need to digest. Right? We're not even digesting all the plant matter we're stuffing in ourselves. Most of it just comes out. Right? We're not able to break. It's not sitting there long enough in this long enough cecum that it's not. And why do we have such acidic, bile? Like, well, to break down fats and protein like that. That's what the body wants. So once I sort of like dug out my old biochemistry books from who knows when and did the best I could, and I used a these concepts are hard to think about and to try to get to the root of it. But one tool that really helped was using one of these AI tools, Perplexity AI in particular was really helpful because you can ask it from 2 different angles a question, and then it'll try to sort of connect the dots in that space. But the other thing that I really liked about that Perplexity AI was it pulls up research. So you can ask it, what is that Minnesotan study where they had institutionalized people? Like, I don't even know the name of it. What is that study? And can you give me a summary of it? Boom, there it is. And there's a link to the study. Boom, and I can read it, right? So when you look at medical stuff, it's like you need an aid to help you translate even the medical stuff. And that's not perfect. And I wouldn't rely on it entirely for your knowledge. But when you do enough triangulation of sources, when you find a couple of other sources, then it starts to fit into the puzzle piece. When I was in the Michael Gerber days, it sort of all made sense. Not really. It was like I was trying to fit a puzzle piece. Why I'm eating more fiber, I'm eating more vegetables. Why is my gut just getting worse? It just something was missing. And then when I had come across Richard and Dr. Anthony Chafee, it's like, and then started doing the research into that, it's like the puzzle pieces obviously fit. It yes, this is how we've been all eating since 300,000 years ago. It's not the agriculture is just a new phenomenon. Our ability to, you know, make really sweet fruit, recent phenomenon. That's not how the human species has evolved. You know,
Right.
so
And yeah, I mean, when you get to that point, like all the domino pieces kind of just fall into place, right? It's like, well, of course, this is the way we should have been looking at this, right?
yeah, yes. It's just it's shockingly, because if you can it may seem, perhaps for somebody who is not eating this way, to then do the research, it seems like this is crazy. And there's so much counter perspective studies, epistemological studies. I got to learn about what epistemological studies are. And you're like, oh, great. This is wildly inaccurate as it is, theoretical stuff. But it's like, if you're not driven, that's why I think people that have gotten sick are probably the ones that end up as carnivores, because it's like a last ditch effort. Like, I can't take it anymore. Let me just try this and see what happens. It's not the last thing that makes any sense to anybody, right? But everybody else is just looking at that and going, no, well, look at the American Heart Association. Look at all this other. Look at my health magazine is telling me I need more, grains and whole grains and the type of carbohydrates. And it's like, no, carbohydrates are just a chain of sugars. That's all it is. It's the undigestible. Why are we putting undigestible things in our body? It's like, once you get it, it just feels so weird that that's how we've been told. And I know that I've had moments, especially when I'm off playing basketball at 5:30 in the morning, where like the thought comes in. I'd watched, just watching sometimes I'm playing basketball, I'm listening to some of your interviews, as I'm going through their stories. And I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but I get like, sometimes I get caught up in a really angry feeling, disturbed anger about how we've been all just basically misled and bullshitted about this. And it hurts me, because that's what they're feeding these kids at schools. That's what everybody thinks is healthy, to be balanced, all that. And it's like,
And it's accelerating now, right? Like when we were kids, we're the same age. When we were kids, it wasn't this level of eat the plants wasn't at this point, right?
no, you're right. I'm half Mexican, but I'm half German. I have a German grandmother, and she would make, I remember her dinners where she would make a little thing of vegetables, like small amount, heavily cooked in butter, like really cooked down, and a piece of beef pork or something. And and she used tallow and butter, and that's how she cooked. And I think it was my dad who had tried in later stages of her life, try to convince her to like go to margarine, get rid of you're eating too much, cholesterol causing agents. To this day, my dad's still around, and to this day, he's adamant about his vegetarianism, and I don't want to talk too much about him. I want to embarrass him, but it's like we've been misled. It's just been the 50 years of not accurate stuff, and then for my kid who's into sports, that like we have to sign up as parents to bring snacks to the thing, and it's like it's just the bags of Doritos, it's Gatorade, it's like the worst of the worst. I mean, the kids love eating that stuff, but that's what's happening, right? Like, you're just getting them hooked early and giving them the impression, and then that just
And
rides with you until you're sick.
that's so hard as a parent, right? Because you're like,
It's
I want to
awful.
give them the right food, but I also don't want them to stand out like a sore thumb and look really weird to all their friends, right?
It's just awful, and I have to, and I just, like all the birthdays, it's not, it's just this, just constant sugary mess, and I don't think people realize how toxic that stuff is. They just don't, you know. And I don't know what to do about it because it does feel overwhelming sometimes. I don't. We're gonna sign up for giving snacks, and I'm still thinking like, what are we gonna do? Like, I'm gonna bring like beef jerky or something. Like, yeah, I don't know. Well, I think what I could do is like just slices of orange. Okay, if we're gonna eat some sugary thing, might as well be this a piece of fruit. Why are we eating some you know factory made with God knows what ingredients are in there, but then yeah, you'll be the weird kid with the weird parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at this stage, it's carnivore all the way for you?
Yeah. 100%. There's no turning back. I just got back from the weekend with my friends, and it's a weekend away from the family. It's with the boys. I get to splurge a little on some stuff, but today's workout, I felt it. I got 45 minutes in, and I'm like, all right, I need to. I'm sugar. I'm off the train of it, and I know it's going to take me like about 4 or 5 days to fully get it all out. Maybe from what I did, but I know that going into doing it. But when I'm eagerly, happily come back to just eating my steaks and my ribs and my pork chops and whatever fish, that I know that I'm just going to feel really, relaxed. I mean, there's so many other little things that had come to fruition. Like I remember I used to, my kids are pretty small. They're like 7 and 9, and we got to get, read them to bed. And it's like 9 o'clock, and it's like, I'm exhausted from the day, right? Was the norm, but it wasn't that. It was exhausted from the eating too many carbs, too much sugary stuff, and now my body's just like doesn't have the extra gear into this. And ever since January, it's like nighttime, bedtime's fun. That's like get to sit down, crack those books. I'm gonna start reading with reading my kids with the stories and making different voices for all the characters. I have the energy to do that. It's that simple. It's like I can.
You remember those old computer games, the video games you'd have on your home TV, and it was like you had a paddle on either side, and you'd knock the ball between the paddles. The before
Pong.
times, that's your blood sugar is going like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Back and up and down. And then you get rid of that, and now it's like you're like cruising speed at all times. It's amazing. And I appreciate you asking me to come. I wanted to tell this story because I think people that in ulcerative colitis like I still go into that Reddit subgroup. That was very useful, and I drop in there those comments every once in a while. It's like, just so you guys know, this is what happened to me. I have to be very careful not to say you should do this, you should do that, right? Those people don't like to be should on, right? But every once in a while, uh, it sounds bizarre to one of the admins, and then it's like blocked or something or not. There's some resistance to this idea that you can actually treat this disease with this way of eating. It's not, and I put in some of those publications. Here's a link to this. I drop it in there. Like, it's just a starting point, right? It is a complicated route to wrap your head around because there's so many aspects of where the evidence actually lies. It's not direct, you know, control trials. It's not exact, but neither is nutrition. Neither is nutrition in general. Like, nothing in nutrition is even that, right? Like, there's no causal links here, but there's a bunch of other evidence that most people never heard of, and if you can wrap your head around that enough, you go, holy! It's like a door that opens up in your mind. Boom. How can feeling this good be so bad for you? is one way to think about it. And I can't, and which is hard to then translate to someone else because it's like you just have to try it, right? Everybody's thinking about try it. You just have to try it because that's when you're going to go, oh, I didn't realize how good I can actually feel, how really good I can actually feel. And it comes both a magnified difference and then and also tons of subtle things you just don't even notice. Y- You know, I'm more tolerant with my kids. I'm able to deal with their temper tantrums and whatever. Oh wow, all right, because my body's more relaxed, has more energy. I don't, I can control my emotions better. When you're
Yeah.
sick and depleted, it's like you don't even have the energy to hold that back, you know?
Mm.
Um,
It's like your emotions are on a hair. The blood sugar is just, like, going, "Okay, well, one more push and you're gonna go over the edge."
right. And how do you placate that stuff? Eat more sugary things, right? You go to the bag of you go to the night snacking, you go to the thing because you're just eating your feelings, sort of trying to placate the precipitous, and you just spike your stuff up again, you know?
Ernesto, how can people reach out to you? Do you have any social media or a website or anything?
Well, I run a podcast where I help people make podcasts. So yeah, if you want to check that out, it's Through the Noise podcast, and I have a little business called Through the Noise Consulting. And if anybody out there wants to do this type of thing too, that's where I help. That's what I love doing. That's my day job. But yeah, that's a way to contact me. And of course, if anybody wants to contact me for more insights or some of the material I had researched and collected over the years, I'm happy to share that with anybody, especially if you have ulcerative colitis or IBS or one of those diseases. That people with that, it is a horrific disease. You wouldn't want to wish it on your worst enemy.
No worries. I'll link to those below.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Ernesto. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate you as well. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.